President Trump issues a terrifying warning on Social Security income, with potentially a 21% cut to benefits set to happen within the next 8 years if nothing is done. And did you guys know that roughly 88% of Social Security income recipients are $1,900 away from bankruptcy, and that Social Security income is re-taxed? You pay a tax your whole life, and then they tax it again. And Social Security has never been adjusted for inflation. You guys, what does that tell us about America? Now, our second segment today, we're going to go on the reciprocal Trump tariffs that are set to begin today, which are 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum products. And we're going to talk about how does that impact the checkbook of mom and pop, and is that the best thing for America? Now, our ending segment is going to be on the termination and ending of the penny. Can't they just revalue it 2 cents? Everything will be chaptered in this video. And if you guys can, please do me a favor, like this video, share the video, and comment below on all the things that you guys learned. Mitch Vexler, happy Monday morning, sir. How are you today?
Well, it's a kind of a dreary day here, but the reality is that gold just hit another all-time high and silver's climbing as well. And even NASDAQ is up, but the Dow is down. So all said, not bad.
Yeah, I may have to get some silver. I know I said that in one of our last videos. Either way, let's jump into Social Security, Mitch, and let's start talking about what exactly is the problem with Social Security and decide whether or not it can be fixed. Over the weekend, Yahoo Finance put out this article titled, "President Donald Trump Wants to Change Social Security, but it comes with a potentially cost to retirees." When 2025 began, nearly 52 million retired workers were bringing home an average monthly check of $1,975.34 from Social Security. Just pause for a second here and think about that. $2,000 a month to survive? Could you survive off of $2,000 a month? I couldn't. Though this might sound like a modest amount of income, because it is, it's often a necessity to help aging Americans make ends meet. For 23 years, national pollster Gallup has conducted an annual survey to gauge the reliance of retirees on their monthly Social Security check. Without fail, all 23 years showed that 80 to 90% of respondents, including 88% in 2024, required their Social Security benefit in some capacity to cover their expenses. Before moving on with that article, I wanted to stop a second and I wanted to ask you this question. Now, we've on multiple occasions showed the viewers that the average American is $9,000 away from bankruptcy. However, when we look at the Social Security recipients, 88% of them need the Social Security. The Social Security is $1,900 a month. That's 88% of retirees, potentially $1,900 away from bankruptcy. What does that tell us, sir, about America? Now, remember, to the viewers, you left Canada because of this same crap. So, sir, what does this tell us about America?
The reality is that we've got problems. So that article says potential issues, right? No, we have real issues. So if you go back to the creation of the Social Security, it was created as a direct result to try and help the problems created in the Great Depression. Like all government functions, they may have a good basis of thought in the beginning, but they become toxic nuclear waste by virtue of the continuation of the problems. Well, that is what has happened with Social Security. It's a real problem. Why? Because given the inflation that's been created by the Federal Reserve, if you receive, for the sake of conversation, $4,000 in Social Security payments today, in 10 years from now, that $4,000 may very well be the equivalent of $1,000. And that $1,000 may only be able to buy you 2 grocery carts worth of food. That's the problem. That's why we've been saying that the inflation is a tax. It's a fraudulent, hidden tax. So everything that people are talking about, well, it could be a problem as if it's created by the Trump administration, is complete BS. They are lying. They do not know what they're talking about. They didn't do their research. That's the problem with the Social Security. And Travis, to this point, just this morning, I sent you an email from a lady out of Indiana who is now living in an apartment because she couldn't afford the house. And she is living on roughly $2,000 a month worth of Social Security payments, which clearly isn't going to get her very far. So you see, these problems are real and affect in reality, the majority of the population of the United States. This has got to be fixed, and this all ties back to the real estate taxes, which must be eliminated.
Mitch, when I take a step back and I look at the situation when it comes to our 65 or older group of people, I don't even know what country we live in anymore, honestly. I mean, when I was raised, we took care of our people. We were promised you pay Social Security, you're going to be fine. Sweeping benefit cuts are an estimated 8 years away. Before digging into what President Trump has proposed be done with America's leading retirement program, it's important to understand the dynamics of how we got to where we are now. In each of the last 85 years, the Social Security Board of Trustees has released a report that details every dollar in income the program brings in, as well as where those dollars end up. I doubt that highly. More importantly, the trustees' report examines the future solvency of Social Security trust funds by taking into account changes to fiscal and monetary policy, as well as a myriad of democratic shifts. Since 1985, the trustee report has projected long-term funding obligation shortfall. In this sense, long-term refers to the 75-year period following the release of the trustees' report. This means estimated income collected over 75 years, inclusive of cost of living adjustments, or COLAs, won't fully cover outlays such as benefits and to a far less extent, administrative expenses to run Social Security program. And that's what I'm saying. Just use AI. You'll save a lot of money. Use AI. We don't need these people. As of 2024, Social Security long-term funding obligation shortfall was a whopping 23.2 trillion, which is up 800 billion from the prior year report. So 800 billion up in just 1 year. Oh my God. The bigger worry is that the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund is forecast to exhaust its asset reserves by 2033. Although the OASI is in no danger of bankruptcy or insolvency, the existing payout schedule, including the COLAs for retired workers and survivor benefits, is at risk beyond 2023. If the OASI's asset reserves are fully depleted, the trustees estimate a sweeping benefit cut of 21%. Really crazy, guys. The blame for Social Security's weakening financial outlook has absolutely nothing to do with myths of congressional theft or undocumented migrants receiving traditional benefits. Okay, well, I disagree with that. Rather, it's a function of ongoing democratic shifts, such as historically low U.S. birth rate, a more than halving in legal net migration into the U.S., and rising income inequality. But that's not true. They're not talking about inflation. They're not talking about inflation at all. President Trump wants to change Social Security. The unwritten rule of thumb on Capitol Hill is to avoid the proverbial third rail of politics, Social Security, probably education as well. Even though most lawmakers recognize that America's top social program is ailing, making changes would almost certainly result in a select group of people being worse off than they were before. Kind of like every single American that's not filthy rich in America right now. Unless you're filthy rich, you're worse off than before. However, presidential candidates don't have the luxury of taking no stance on key issues. While Trump has predominantly taken a hands-off approach with Social Security, he did allude to a big change he'd like to see mid to late July. In a post on the president's social media platform, Truth Social, then candidate Trump wrote, "Seniors should not pay tax on Social Security income." And that's 100% true, because Social Security is a tax. So we're paying a tax on the tax we've already paid. This is crazy. The taxation of Social Security benefits began 4 decades ago, with the program's asset reserves nearly depleted in 1983. A bipartisan Congress passed, and then President Ronald Reagan signed the Social Security addendums of 1983 into law. And listen to this is crazy. This sweeping overhaul gradually increased the payroll tax and full retirement age for workers and introduced a non-disposed tax on benefits. So Congress's great idea was to tax the Social Security recipients and make the age higher to retire. Great work, elected officials. You just screwed the people on the bottom once again. Starting in 1984, up to 50% of Social Security benefits became taxable at the federal rate if provisional income created 25,000 for single filers and 32,000 for jointly filed couples. In 1993, a second tier was added that exposed up to 85% of benefits to federal taxation. A provision income topped 34,000 for a single filer or 44,000 for couples filing jointly. The reason for taxation on Social Security benefits is such a sore spot for obvious reasons. It's a lie, it's a fraud, or you're cheating us, and why the president has attempted to capitalize on the popularity of removing it. It's because these income thresholds have never been, and here's the key thing, guys, this is absolutely a tragedy, have never been adjusted for inflation. So some of our biggest at risk, our elderly population, the government just stopped caring about their cost of living. Absolutely shocking. When the initial tax tier was introduced more than 40 years ago, it was only expected to impact around 10% of senior households. But after 4 decades of higher nominal wages and cost of living adjustments, around half of all retiree households are subject to the tax. That's crazy. Mitch, before I show you and the viewers how much money they're getting from taxing Social Security recipients, it's almost $1 trillion. When we look back at 1985, roughly 10% of people needed their retirement income. Now it's around 88%, but that income was never adjusted or increased for inflation. Mitch, isn't that a wealth transfer? Isn't that stealing money from the retired mom and pop and putting it into the hands of the corrupt politicians and just the corrupt elites in general?
Yes, that is out and out stealing, but there was a statement in that article that just said it would do more harm than good to eliminate the Social Security tax. Interesting. You want to know what would do more harm than good? Having 30% plus of your population filing bankruptcy because there is no money to be paying for the Social Security to begin with. And in fact, I'm writing an article, I've been working on this since Thursday of last week, that literally proves that mom and pop have been equity stripped and there simply is no money. They are upside down today. And when I keep saying 30% plus, the actual number based on our math is about 37%. So any idea that these things are divergent from each other is not true. They are totally correlated. You cannot get blood out of a stone. Nobody can. Mom and pop's median household income, which is the only number that matters in all of this, clearly proves there is no money to pay for these items. It clearly proves that the vast majority of people will not be able to retire on Social Security. And it also proves that Social Security, since its inception, has in fact turned out to be a fraud on society. It cannot work. It didn't work. The math never worked. And now that chicken, unfortunately, is coming home to roost.
I'm getting sick and tired of the propaganda on our children to fund the Department of Education and that fraud. I'm sick and tired of our elderly, the propaganda there to fund all of these other illegal activities. I mean, this entire situation at hand right now is absolutely disgusting. And it's made like this. I don't know if the system's made for this assumption that people are honest and have integrity, but whatever reason it was made, it's not working, and things definitely need to change. According to the 2024 Trustee Report, the taxation of benefits was estimated to generate almost $1 trillion, $943.9 billion in cumulative income between 2024 and 2023. Good job. So they're taxing the tax. We've come far from when we used to revolt against T-tax. While removing this tax would increase what select retirees are able to keep for a few years, it would ultimately widen Social Security's long-term funding obligation shortfall and shorten the OASI's asset reserve depletion timeline. So they're saying that, hey, if you remove income tax and tax on there, then this is going to run out even sooner. That's what this article is pointing out. This is a good time to mention that Trump's desire to reduce/eliminate taxes in other areas could come back to haunt Social Security, but not if they remove the fraud. The fraud exceeds how much money they would make in those taxes, by the way. In October, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget examined the full effect of Donald Trump's tax agenda and the effects it would have on Social Security. The CRFB's analysts determined that Trump's proposed elimination of taxes on overtime pay and tips would increase Social Security's 10-year deficit by $900 billion. My gosh, collectively ending the taxation on benefits and eliminating taxes on overtime pay and tips would widen Social Security's deficit by an estimated $1.85 trillion over 10 years. The top expenditure for the US government right now, 21% of the budget for the federal government, 21% you see here, is Social Security. So Social Security is vital for Americans, and the Americans that are receiving the Social Security were promised to receive the Social Security. Now they're saying it's going to be taken away. I've been paying Social Security half my life. I don't even know if I'm going to get it, and I'm going to be taxed on the money I've already been paying. This is absolutely crazy. But my question, Mitch, is maybe you can articulate this. Obviously, when we change one thing here, something else is impacted over there. And they're pointing out that if you change anything, that you're going to lose money even faster. But isn't it fair to say that the elimination of fraud alone would be enough to save Social Security?
Absolutely. And even if you look at the real estate taxes, my favorite topic, if you eliminate the fraud, which is eliminating the real estate tax in and of themselves, you automatically inject another $1 trillion into the US economy on the spot. So, because all that money ends up going into the economy, it ends up prohibiting 30% plus of your population from going bankrupt. It allows all those people to end up owning the land beneath their feet. In other words, they now have a balance sheet. So in 30 years from now, they can retire. What these articles are completely void of is any sense of intelligence. You must look at the entire picture. What has happened here is the equity stripping of mom and pop. You do not own the land beneath your asset, be it commercial or a house. How do you get that land back? Easy. Get rid of the real estate tax. Repeal the real estate tax in favor of a uniform state's sales tax. You get rid of a massive chunk of fraud in the system. And then there will be additional money from which to pay for these items, i.e. Social Security, if you believe in the concept. Bottom line is, it's unfunded liabilities, and mathematically speaking, it's a sinking fund, and it'll sink on its own in due course. So you may as well face reality and deal with it now, rather than trying to kick the can down the road. It doesn't work. And then the other thing I would like to say is that nobody, regardless of your income status in the United States, should depend on Social Security for their retirement. You've been lied to. That is the truth. We have to deal with it. We have to understand it. Repeal the real estate tax stops the vast majority, 30% plus of the population from going bankrupt.
None of these talking heads or these suits or the media wants to talk about cutting the fraud and saving money that way. It's just like, no, if you save the Social Security, you're going to mess everyone else up. But what if we just start talking about only the fraud and that's it, right? Like, let's keep Social Security going fine. But let's just talk about eliminating billions, if not trillions of dollars in fraud instead. I think that would be a great topic of conversation. And I hope to hear it here shortly on the news. And we are, because of Musk and because of what Trump is doing. Hopefully they will successfully continue their warpath of destruction to fraud. We have reciprocal tariffs starting today, 25% on steel and aluminum. And so we're going to talk about how that's going to impact mom and pop's pocketbook and whether or not that's good for America. But we're going to start by reviewing what's going on by taking a look at this article. This came out earlier this morning. Today, Trump says he'll announce yet another new tariff on Monday. President Trump, speaking to reporters on Air Force One on Sunday, yesterday said he planned on announcing a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports into the United States. We are also announcing steel tariffs on Monday, he said, adding any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff. Aluminum too, he added. Trump also said he planned to hold a separate news conference on Tuesday or Wednesday to announce a massive new reciprocal tariff, which could match other countries' tariffs on U.S. goods, dollar for dollar. If they charge us, we charge them. So tit for tat. He did not provide many details about how expensive the new tariffs would be or when they may go into effect. It's not clear if the new steel and aluminum tariffs will be on top of the tariffs already in place on exports from countries like China. Trump in 2018, during his previous administration, also announced 25% tariffs on steel and 10% tariffs on aluminum, although the following year he lifted them on Mexico and Canada. Last week, Trump imposed a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods imported into the U.S. on top of all existing tariffs already in place. So this would be in addition to the 10% tariff. After those tariffs went into effect Tuesday, China quickly retaliated by placing tariffs on some chips and metals, began investigation on Google, and placed the maker of the Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger brands on its unreliable entity list. I wonder if they put themselves on that list. But Trump already began dialing back those tariffs, pausing taxes on any goods worth $800 or less imported into the U.S. until the Commerce Department can develop a system for imposing those hard-to-track items. Trump also paused 25% across-the-board tariffs on Mexico and Canada imports, at least until March 1st, so a few weeks from now. While the U.S. is not the manufacturing-focused economy it once was, it still consumes tens of millions of tons of steel and aluminum a year, feeding industries, and here it is, such as automaking, aerospace, oil production, construction, and infrastructure such as roads and bridges. Tariffs would increase the cost of production in those industries, both because of the increased cost of the imported steel and because domestic steel and aluminum makers could rise the price of their products due to the reduced competition from low-priced imports. The steel industry praised the prospect of tariffs to protect America's interest. AISI welcomes President Trump's continued commitment to a strong American steel industry, which is essential to Americans' national security and economic prosperity. Very interesting here. This concludes Canada and Mexico are the largest and third largest exporters of steel to the U.S. respectively. Canada now accounts for nearly a quarter of steel imported by American businesses by weight, while Mexico accounts for about 12% according to government data provided by the American Iron and Steel Institution. The European Union, which counted the U.S. as the biggest market for its steel and iron exports in 2023, said today, that it saw no justification for the imposition of tariffs on its exports. We will react to protect the interest of the European businesses, workers, and consumers from unjustified measures. Overall, steel imported by American businesses plunged 25% between 2017, the year before there were tariffs, and 2019, the first full year of the tariffs, although some of that decline was due to decreased steel consumption. Domestic steel production rose in the same period, but only equated to about 2/3 of the drops in imports. Despite the competitive lift that the domestic steel industry has received from tariffs, domestic production was down about 2% last year compared to 2023, and nearly down 10% from where it stood a decade ago. Mitch, a lot of people are confused as to what tariffs are and how they work. And, how is it good for America? All of that type of stuff. So can you answer the question? Two questions here is, how are these tariffs going to directly impact what I'm paying per month? Mom and pop's checkbook, right? How is that going to impact me when I go out and live my life? And then the second question I have for you, Mitch, is based on all the stuff that you've been through and studying, do you think that these tariffs are good for America?
Let's take the last question first. President Trump and the Trump administration wouldn't be jacking with these tariffs. It wasn't good for America. First thing. Second thing is, with regard to its impact on a daily life, it depends what business you're in, right? If you're in the manufacturing business like Boeing, you want the lower cost of steel. If you're a consumer, you want the lower cost of steel or aluminum, which goes in the planes. So all these things are connected at the hip. Does it have a direct impact on the average American with regard to steel and aluminum immediately? No. Will it over time? Yes, because that's American jobs that get to stay here over the long haul. Over and above that, there really is a national security risk by having steel imported from around the globe. So those things have to be taken into consideration. And yes, there is a cost associated with a national security risk. How do you quantify that? Well, I'm not into the mathematics under the hood of these issues, but one must understand the idea of having imports from, say, China or Brazil that hurts our ability to produce is a huge problem. And it just simply cannot be tolerated.
Do you think it's a good idea, potentially, Mitch, to invest in companies that are steel manufacturers here in America? I mean, is that a good investment pick, do you think?
I would look at it from the standpoint, if you understand what that company is doing and you're able to purchase its stocks based on a certain value, in other words, price is what you pay, value is what you receive. If you understand what you're doing and you're buying it at the low end of a cycle and you want to sell puts or sell put spreads against it, sure, you can play. If you want to buy it for the long haul and just say, okay, fine, I'm going to hold up 1,000 shares of the stock, sure, you can play. but you have to know what you're doing. And this is an issue through these tariffs that aren't directly related or correlated to the idea of a share price. They are more used as a negotiation to help balance out the national debt and taking into consideration the national security. So there's several things at play here, but to your answer about from the standpoint of an investment, yeah, I mean, you can even look at it from the standpoint of looking at the producers of steel, who are the smelters, what companies own the smelters, et cetera, et cetera. So sure, absolutely, but you have to be cautious as to what you're doing. You better know what you're doing.
So overall, you think it's good for America. It's not going to necessarily directly impact American households, except for that it should keep more jobs here in America. I mean, honestly, Mitch, I like what I'm seeing so far. Instead of spending money, I see the new administration cutting money. Now, to the viewers, please don't call me. So, someone called me the other day. It was funny. They were like, I like what you're doing. I like your show, but I believe you're a Trump implant, I think, or a Trump plant. And I was thinking to myself, my God, like, then why am I so poor and struggling every day if I'm a Trump implant? You know what I mean? I'm just being real, man. And to me, math matters. And also something that matters is helping people in need. So I'm not saying don't help people in need. I'm saying that the people in need are being used as propaganda to keep the fraud going. And I don't like that. And I see the current administration at least trying to do something. I have faith in no man that's a politician, though. And every politician, in my opinion, is guilty until proven innocent. And so right now, they're all guilty. Now let's go on to the next guilty verdict, which is for the penny. The penny, you guys, is dead. President Trump announced plans to put a stop to producing pennies, which cost more than their value to make. For far too long, the United States has minted pennies, which literally cost us more than 2 cents. This is so wasteful. I have instructed my Secretary of the U.S. Treasury to stop producing new pennies. So you may want to start collecting pennies, and you may need to collect a lot of them because they're not worth that much money. He added, let's rip the waste out of the great nation's budget, even if it's just a penny at a time. The Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which is led by billionaire Elon Musk, posted on X last month that producing the penny is costing American taxpayers tens of millions of dollars, suggesting that it may be one of the items it may consider eliminating. Musk's initiative aimed at cutting $2 trillion in federal spending didn't directly state that the penny would be eliminated, but highlighted that it cost 3 times more to make than it's actually worth. According to the U.S. Mint, each penny cost about 3.69 cents to produce in the fiscal year of 2024, costing the taxpayers $119 million. Funny how they just care about pennies, but not the trillions of dollars in fraud. This marked the 19th consecutive year in which a production exceeded its face value. In the U.S., the penny was one of the first coins made by the U.S. Mint after its establishment in 1792 when it was first produced. The coin was larger and made of pure copper. Today's smaller coin is made mostly of zinc, according to the U.S. Mint. Tell me what your thoughts are on, eliminating the penny and maybe, couldn't we consider revaluing the penny maybe, Mitch? Can't we just make it 3 cents instead of 1 cent? Why we got to just, knock it out altogether? What's your reaction here?
I'm not a fan of this because I would like somebody to answer one question. If you get rid of the penny in its entirety, that means you're now stuck with a nickel. The delta between 3.5 cents and a nickel, who's paying for that, right? So in other words, that's just more money getting flushed down the drain. That's the A component. The B component is, how do you look at the inflation? In other words, why is the cost of producing that copper penny 3.5 cents or 3.6 cents as compared? So in other words, how much of that is inflation? Well, in a simple penny, answer the question. And what you will find is the fraud. Inflation is a tax. Inflation is a fraud. Who are the largest purveyors of fraud on the planet? The Federal Reserve, interestingly enough, that ends up printing the penny, and the real estate taxes. Those are the 2 largest purveyors of fraud on the planet. Get rid of the fraud, and you get rid of the inflation. That's the math. That's what's under the formula. So I'm not a fan, although I do understand simplistically why they're looking at it, but answer the 2 questions, fix the 2 questions, right? Get rid of the fraud, get rid of the inflation.
To anyone that's on Social Security or any type of fixed income that's struggling, one thing that you can do right now to make a difference is get elected. literally get elected to your districts. And trust me, you guys, it's not as hard as you think in most districts, but get elected to your districts and start making a difference. You guys can actually do that. Mitch and I went to a town hall meeting around the Dallas area, and mayors were there saying, hey, we need to fill these seats. There's not enough people getting elected. So if you do that, you can start making a change. We all need to start making a change, and we need to properly protect people in need. That's our children, that's the elderly, that's victims of like Hurricane Helene and natural disasters. I mean, there are people suffering right now in America, and we need to help them. Now, Mitch Vexler, I want to give you the last word. Sir, how are we going to end today's video?
Those who are willfully participating in the fraud by refusing to repeal the real estate tax in favor of the uniform state sales tax are in fact going against their own family, their constituents, and society. And we have a document that's coming up. I've been working on this since last Thursday, which is a memo to the FBI, the SEC, the IRS, laying out all the laws that are associated with this fraud. I would ask that DOGE get their hands on this, because this is much larger. These real estate taxes are much larger and a huge contributor to the problems with regard to Social Security, et cetera, in the United States. So anybody that has access to X or could reach out to Doge, we're not on X, but we're asking for anybody who has that type of access to get these documents rolling through. Everything that we've done is coming up to this point right now. And what we're talking about in the Social Security is a direct ramification that mom and pop don't have the money. You cannot get blood out of a stone. You must recognize the fraud, and you must eliminate that fraud in order to stop all these people from going bankrupt. These things are all 100% correlated.
And to the politicians, you must start caring about your constituents and about the citizens of the United States of America. Now, other than that, guys, we hope you enjoy this video. Don't forget to share the video, comment on the video, like the video. And other than that, you guys are out there just living your life. You guys already know we wish you luck, and we hope you win.